When Aidan Levy, author of Saxophone Colossus, The Life and Music of Sonny Rollins, appeared on Sunday Night Live, Brett asked him about Sonny's political perspective and his commitment to change.
Sonny was very close to his grandmother. They lived together. And when Sonny was just a kid, she took him to Marcus Garvey rallies. Now, that name, Marcus Garvey, might not be familiar to everyone. Mr. Garvey was a Jamaican, a very strong advocate for the rights and self-determination for Black people. So Sonny's political consciousness developed at an early age, and Freedom Suite is a part of that. Could you talk about how Freedom Suite came to be and something additionally about Sonny's political consciousness?
Yeah, so his whole family raised him with a sense of social consciousness, and there were many political figures that Sonny's family looked up to and followed. In addition to Garvey, there were people like Ashley Totten, who was a big name in the fight for labor rights and was part of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and some other organizations. So they were a political family, and Garvey was huge for his grandmother, and she hung a Black nationalist flag in the house. His grandmother, Miriam, was obviously this unstoppable force and also introduced Sonny to gospel music at Mother Horn's Church in Harlem, but also, as you said, these Garvey rallies. And there's this portrait of his grandmother, Miriam, that I was able to include in the book. I don't think many people had seen that photo. I think you had seen it, Brett, but I just love this photo because it's just so evocative of who she was. But yeah, he would go to rallies with his grandmother Miriam, starting when he was about 4 years old, to advocate for causes or protest injustices, for example, the Scottsboro Boys, or in support of Paul Robeson, who was such a hero to Sonny, Paul Robeson. In fact, when Sonny graduated high school, everybody in their senior year yearbook wrote what they wanted to be when they grew up and just some phrase that might describe them. And everybody wrote something like, a lawyer or a doctor. And Sonny wrote a second Paul Robeson. There was already one, but he wanted to be like him. And he was. So this album, Freedom Suite, was the first civil rights themed album of the hard bop era. So it comes in this long lineage of social justice music, songs of protest. And it was inspired in part when Sonny had risen to this level of fame and he still had trouble getting an apartment as a Black man in New York. They just couldn't get a lease. And eventually he did, in part through the help of Sonny Stitt. But this and so many other experiences that he had over the course of his life inspired him to just put it front and center as a part of his music. And he did that through Freedom Suite. And for that album, he enlisted Max Roach and Oscar Pettiford, two musicians who had a deep sense of social consciousness. But this was several years before Max Roach recorded the Freedom Now Suite with Abby Lincoln. I'm not sure everybody's aware that the Freedom Suite came first. And it's a through composed piece that incorporates improvisation and has several themes which he develops over the course of it. And it's really one of my favorite Sonny Rollins albums and one of my favorite works by Sonny Rollins. And incidentally, Benny Golson reviewed it in the Jazz Review after it came out. So he got some early recognition for that work, but not enough at the time because it was controversial. And after it came out, Sonny went on his first big tour that was called Jazz for Moderns, organized largely through Leonard Feather. And that tour went through the South. And when he went on tour, they went to a couple of colleges in Virginia. And he met some students after the concert who were fans of Sonny Rollins, but apparently not of what he stood for. So this was after the Freedom Suite came out. And I think this was just a reminder that people wouldn't change overnight and that it was a fight that he had to keep fighting. And he always did. He was always part of the struggle. He still is. But that album, The Freedom Suite, I think still is something that we should all be listening to, because it's a fight that we all still have to keep fighting.
Now, what about the liner notes on the back of Freedom Suite? Do you know the story behind that?
So Sonny wrote the liner notes to that album, Freedom Suite, which was released by Riverside. And what happened is Riverside ended up re-releasing that record as Shadow Waltz with different cover art, and it didn't have Sonny's liner notes. So basically they pulled it. Now, I think that, and in the book I go into this in detail, but Orrin Keep News did want to support Sonny there. However, this did happen. They did re-release it as Shadow Waltz, and took out that liner note message. Now, I think that in terms of that, the message still comes across in a certain sense, because if you look at Shadow Waltz, you'll see this cover art, this photo taken, this portrait of Sonny taken by the photographer Joe Alper. And I just think he bears a striking resemblance to Frederick Douglass here. You know, later on, Sonny did collaborate with Orrin Keep News at Milestone for a long time. It's a complicated story, and but yeah, they shouldn't have taken those liner notes out. I mean, it's such a beautiful expression.
And now the reissues, the CD reissues, have the original liner notes.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth reading. I'd just like to mention also, Sonny made a political statement. Max made a political statement. Charles Mingus did shortly thereafter with the song "Fables of Faubus." Mm-hmm. And throughout Mingus's career, he was very outspoken politically. Mingus, oh yeah, he recorded the song, "Oh Lord, please don't drop that H-bomb on me." And Mingus was a dramatic, fiery presence who wasn't afraid to speak the truth. And in recent times, Sonny has not been afraid. In fact, he was one of the first people to come out about global warming. Back in the 90s, Sonny was talking about it during his concerts, in interviews. A CD was released, Global Warming, and several of the tunes on the album also have those kind of implications. When you talked to Sonny, what did he have to say about that?
Well, firstly, that album Global Warming is another one where he wrote the liner notes, and that's worth seeking out and just seeing what he has to say there. But Sonny was aware of what was going on with the climate right when anybody started becoming aware of it. So he was reading people like Bill McKibben, and I think it's The End of Nature, I believe. And, many other books on the subject. And that album, released in 1998, I think was geared towards really putting an end to that and making a change in our society. Of course, in a lot of ways, things have only gotten worse. When was it that An Inconvenient Truth came out? I mean, we still haven't woken up here. So Sonny is still speaking out about this. Incidentally, a major source in the book for the section on that album, Global Warming, actually comes from your article about Sonny that was written at that time, Brett, which is just a fantastic piece of writing. I think that was in Jazz Times, maybe Downbeat. Was it Jazz
Yeah.
Times?
Yeah. A funny thing about that article, the day that I interviewed Sonny, I forget the year, it was in January, and it was like 55 degrees. This is just the beginning of all of a sudden it got warm in the winter. And we were talking about climate change on the phone. I mean, Sonny was really plugged into that. And I've known Sonny since 1978. I did a cover story for Downbeat magazine. That's where I first met, and I met Lucille as well. And Sonny's a very political guy. He's not afraid to. He's interested in it. He wants to see positive change. He did a benefit for Pete Seeger shortly before he stopped playing. And what's interesting, I don't know if you heard this. Aiden and I haven't really shared notes yet about, because I have some stories that didn't show up in the book. Aiden that's just the way it is. Other people I know have stories that I never heard. But Sonny and Lucille were diametrically opposed, because Lucille was a conservative and Sonny is obviously a liberal. And they would have these really intense discussions. And Peter Downey, who was Sonny's road manager for many years, who passed away, a very, very nice fellow, once remarked to me, he said that Sonny and Lucille would have these really intense discussions, and then I'd see them in the airport, they were holding hands, and Lucille liked to listen to Bob Grant and some of those talk radio right-wing lunatics. Sonny would just go and practice. I mean, but it shows people who differ can get along, unlike the America today, where politically, if you're on one side or the other, you might hate each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sonny and Lucille had a very deep bond, and their political differences couldn't break that. So I think it really, that is exemplary. I'm not sure how she felt about climate change, but I don't know if we'll be able to hear about that one if they ever talked about the global warming album. But yeah, Sonny still talks about it, and just the idea that we're cutting off the branch that we're sitting on, and he's right. I mean, so he spent so much of his life combating racism, capitalism, classism, and environmental exploitation. It's not just one cause. And I think that he had the idea from W.E.B. Du Bois that any figure, and particularly artists who rose to a level of prominence in our society, had a moral responsibility to speak out against social injustice of any kind. And Sonny took that to heart. So that's why he's still been dedicated to that mission.